Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. So I want to start off with a disclaimer. I want to remind everyone that this is not a substitute for a mental health relationship. I do recommend that you find a therapist that is in your area to work on your unique issues. This podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes. So today I landed something that I had been so looking forward to, and someone that I have enjoyed watching on the video on demand and what's known as the tabletop role-playing games. So, and this came because I actually happen to know their brother, who was supposed to be on this podcast, apparently is off, I'm going to say probably sleeping in this Sunday morning. It is my, and I'm getting tongue-tied here, distinct pleasure to introduce Teri Gamble, who is a Los Angeles-based sales and marketing strategist, podcast, SAG and AFTRA actor, improviser, graduate of UCLA, graduate of Harvard University and of the Second City Hollywood Conservatory, a 2019 recipient of the NBC and Universal Bob Curry Comedy Fellowship for sketch comedy and writing performances. Teri is a founding member of the Diversity Hire Comedy, a 7-person BIPOC improvise and sketch comedy team. They write, direct, and produce web series and sketches and comedy improv videos. They have the original web series Saved by the Improv and March Content Madness. 28 comedy videos culminating in the launch of the inaugural Diversity Hire Comedy Short Film Festival. The team is presently working on their first TV pilot and can be found at www.diversityhire.com. Teri is also the co-host of the Horror Movie Survival Guide, a weekly horror movie podcast that takes a deep dive into the different genres, related films, fun interviews with horror creators and celebrities. Teri is also a co-host of the Our Black History with her brother Brandon Gamble, who is the one who's missing right now. We'll go ahead and keep ribbing him a bit for that, where they interview different folks about what it means to grow up and navigate the world while Black. And as I said, how I particularly first was introduced to Teri, she's an avid D&D or Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role-playing gamer and can be found on various podcasts, streams, and channels on Twitch and YouTube. She's also been part of Comedy Greats shows, starring opposite of America Ferrera on NBC's Superstore, Ed O'Neill on Modern Family, and Kat Dennings on Dollface. So she's got quite a list here, and it's just quite a coup to get her. So, Teri, welcome to Untying Knots.
Oh my goodness, Perry, what an intro. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here and excited to chat with you. My brothers told me wonderful things about you too, and how you all met with the Black Psychologists Association and the work that you all have done. And I love everything about that. So I'm happy to be here to chat with you about everything.
Beautiful. Yeah, because one of the things I also wanted with this podcast was to be able to also talk to creatives. And especially as being a geek, blurred, nerd, bleak gamer,
yes.
When it comes to dealing with mental health, for those of us that are of color, we often get lost in all of that. And to be able to talk to a Black creator who is creating content, not just for everybody, but especially has content that speaks for us as people of color, was very much something that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's start with the step of question. How did you find yourself into all of this?
Oh gosh. I have been a creative person my whole life. I was making shows and making things up with my brother since I could talk. Almost probably before I could talk. There's pictures of us like recreating Bible stories and, like doing shows for our parents, very, very young. I fell in love with acting and cinema and theater and all that. Probably when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I saw Singing in the Rain and I was like, that I want to do. I want to sing, I want to dance. But I grew up in a very conservative religious household and they were like, well, those are not necessarily things we were going to support, but we like that you're creative, but how about you play piano and do gymnastics instead of singing and dancing? And
Oh
so
my.
I did that until I couldn't anymore, and, got into community theater and started singing in church and, performing in other outlets any way I could.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found myself in my undergrad at UCLA. I made it into their theater program, which was pretty competitive. They only taken, I think, 50 freshmen. And so, there's a audition process, interview process. And I thought I had like completely failed my interview process when I went to interview for the school, because I just sat with, one of the administrators of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Mom, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I had a really good talk. We just talked about the pajama game for 20 minutes. Like, administrator, Gary Gardner, since passed on, and I went to his funeral. It was a huge thing because he was dearly beloved by many UCLA theater folks. And during the service, they actually showed some amazing videos. He had done his whole music theater history class, had been put on video since I had taken it in the 90s. And so it was really lovely to hear him give some of the talks that I remember, but they played a snippet of him talking about his first record he ever bought was the Pajama Game. I did not know that I had like literally went in and talked about his all-time, like his homing beacon, his favorite musical, like his gateway drug. I had gone in and talked with him about it. And that was like, that's why I got into school. And I just started crying at his service. And I just knew that was like, theater has a way, and you like the stuff you love, like you said, it has that way that connects us. And that's what's so exciting about being a part of making content that people get excited about, and they connect, and meeting people literally all over the world that I've gotten to work with, and bringing that forth. I mean, I've gotten to travel and I've done shows in Russia and England and Australia and the Czech Republic. I've gotten to go all over the world because of theater and because of art. And that's what really does, I think, connect the whole world. I call the world a neighborhood, where I feel like, like everyone's like, oh, the world's so big. I'm like, it really isn't. Like, you go someplace, you're going to have a connection with somebody about something. You're both going to have a, something interest that is common. So that's what's brought me here, and all these other endeavors. There's a long list because I will say yes to a lot of things, and I love making things with people that I can learn and grow from.
But isn't that also one of the hallmarks of improv? Say yes.
And yes, and
yes, and which is one of the qualities you have to have, as especially when playing Dungeons and Dragons and being a dungeon master. It's like, yes, you can do this. And here's the other little thing you're not being aware of.
Yeah, well, that's what, like, people who are like, what exactly is D&D? I'm like, it's improv with some more rules. Do you know what I mean? Though, like, it's just a few more things around to kind of guide the game. But I think the best role play gamers are improvers for sure.
Oh yeah, it's quite a number of them watching that on when I'm watching it on the streams. So how did you start with getting connected between the aspect of being so, as you said, you'd worked in a lot of theater, and with theater was their passion is taking you around the world, but how are you balancing that with the mundane requirements of life?
Oh gosh, you mean like eating and like having a roof over my head? The real challenge, and also trying to be creative. Yes.
Yeah, which becomes the fear of so many Black parents too.
100%. Oh my gosh, my parents were very much very concerned, which is why I had to go to school, even though I feel like I could have skipped that step. I wish I didn't have student debt.
Don't we all?
That's very real. But my parents are both, educators, as I'm sure you know, and have, worked in education forever. And it was always the key for them and their success in life. So they wanted to instill that with me and my brother. For sure, it was never a matter of if you go to college. It was when you go to college. When, what are you studying? What are you doing? So there's definitely been some challenges throughout my lifetime where, I've lived in places that they were not exactly excited about, because I was like, I can afford this right now. This is where I'm going to be. And this is where I need to live right now to like continue to do the creative thing I want to do. Bouncing between jobs, finding jobs that that can sustain and that had health insurance, or, all those kinds of things. Those have been challenges, having to go to, Planned Parenthood, or having to go to community clinics or whatever, depending on where I was in the world. It is scary, I think, for parents to feel like, oh, that's not stable, or, oh, I don't want you to be unsuccessful. I think that's just the biggest thing. They just want you to be comfortable, and they don't want you to have to go through the same struggles that they went through. I can see that in their eyes, but I was like, you struggled all this time just so I get to struggle in a different way. So thank you. Like it's me struggling for the stuff that I feel like they are very creative people as well, but they chose like the hard sciences and maths and whatever, like that was what got them through. But my mom used to always like be obsessed with like Oprah, and like she would, do her own kind of version of a talk show at church. And I was like, I think you have your own kind of aspirations, mom. Like, and she's writing a book now. And like, so she's got her own creative outlet, and, is an amazing like floral designer. And so she's always making something creative. And my dad, since he retired for the last like 20 years, he plays ukulele, guitar, and does watercolor, and like does like landscaping. So I'm just like, all he's doing is creative stuff now. So I'm like, well, that just goes to show me that you guys always had that in you, and like just needed that you wanted to have that security to be able to nurture it. So I just started doing it earlier.
Nice. So how did you find yourself connecting more with launching yourself into the stream and podcast world?
How did I get into gaming on the internet? That is, like so many things. It was like a random accident. I again, being raised very religious, D&D was like the devil, as a child, the satanic panic. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is that thing? So at like 35, one of my best girlfriends, Julia, who's my podcast co-host at Horror Movie Survival Guide, her boyfriend at the time is a really big dungeon master too. He had a podcast called Crit Juice at the time, and is an amazing role play gamer and one of the best dungeon masters I know. And I was like, hey, I would like to learn and get into. He was like, he got so excited, of course, as like any dungeon master does, with like a new player who's excited and wants to maybe do a weekly game. Like, yes, please join this party. And so he had a few other friends that were all kind of newbies, as well as a couple of friends that were like, legends of the game, so to speak. And he invited me to come play, and we just played at their house. But the people I played with, I did not realize till later. I was like, oh, Amy Vorpal, who's like she writes writes for the D&D manuals and stuff now, and is an amazing gamer herself. And she was at the table. And then there's a couple other people that had just done a D&D movie that had never played D&D, but they were in this like adventurous fantasy movie. So this was the table we had for this, like my first game. And so and David is amazing. He'd been on stream for a while at a channel called Saving Throw Show. And so he was like, this is fun. You're good at this. Like, you should do this. And I was like, okay, great. And so then through knowing him, I got invited to play like a Star Wars game with him online. And then after that, they just kept getting invited back, and other people kept calling me. And eventually that was it. So most of my like extreme gaming time has been like, most of my big campaigns have been recorded, which is kind of fun to go back, and I can go watch a lot of my campaigns, but that was it. And then you make friends, and they call you, and if you're still cool and they like you get to keep playing with them, right? And they'll call you again for another show. And then also the confluence of the last couple of years too, of like, the George Floyd of it all, like all of a sudden all of our phones blew up. Anybody who was of color, like they were like people wanting to diversify their tables really quickly. All of a sudden I was saying no to a lot more stuff than I was having to say yes to anymore. And that was also exciting too.
So So there's the sad part of what happened with George Floyd, but also the aspect of beauty that we're seeing so many more players of color and podcast streamers. And I don't know if you can hear that noise in the background. For some reason, my upstairs neighbor is doing what those odd noises all upstairs neighbors do.
It's guaranteed. It's like podcasts. Like, I feel like, I don't know, 101, it always happens. Like all of a sudden, like my gardeners who will always come on a day when they're unscheduled, and all of a sudden be like blowing like leaves outside.
Yeah. But as I was about to say, in the fact that we're seeing so many more of us now on the streams, from you, Bria Iyengar, Christina Ariel, Tanya DePass, B. Dave Walters, DJ Knight, Michael Sinclair,
Critical Bard,
Eugenio. I know there's a few more that I'm probably missing that I generally just follow as many of you as possible. But that leads into this, one of the core questions about what does it mean for you, not just as a creative, but as a player and a Blerddom geek. How does this play into your mental health?
Ooh.
With being able to not only do these, but then adding into the aspect of you're now on display on these channels, and we know there's the trolls, we know there's the backseat armchair gamers and so forth. How
don't read the comments. That's like rule number one, I think, of being a Black creative on the internet is, I mean, obviously you're gonna read them at some point, but just do your best not to. And if you do, um, just know like where that's coming from. Do you know what I mean? Like this pushback of people feeling like they need to fight for some status quo that really is, imaginary as well. Like the status quo is fake. You know what I mean? Like it's all made up as far as like what is culture. I think talking to my friends the other day, I'm like obsessed with like the Hallmark Christmas movies, for better or worse. Like they're terrible, and I always joke that that's what brought Trump, because like I'm like in this essay, because it's like this false narrative that like there's this normal that's out there that most people don't actually have. You know what I mean? Though, like most people do not, have a boyfriend that works in the city and she's a small town girl, or vice versa, or whatever, like it's not all that white. It's not all that that simple. And there's this weird standard that's been put up and put up on a pedestal that's not really real for most people. And people are fighting for this thing that they think is real, that it's like, that's not even what America is. Talked earlier about traveling and going other places, like having perspective is key, right? Like the fact that I'm just ever so grateful that my parents encouraged me to go like do a year abroad during my undergrad, and I traveled and backpacked around the world, and went so many places. And coming back to America, it doesn't seem quite such like a shiny special place. You know what I mean? It's just another place. It's got its problems. It doesn't have good metro in most of it. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that could be better. The healthcare issue, like, there's a lot of stuff that we could be doing better. So when people feel like they're yelling and fighting for this America or this thing, when they troll like that, for me, it makes me sad for them, knowing I'm like, they don't know, from their ignorance of like, just, it goes so deep that they have no idea that they're fighting for a thing that's not even that great. Like ultimately, you know what I mean? They're like that gives me a weird peace, I guess. Like they don't even, it doesn't faze me in that same way. Having good friends you can call and talk to and vent to about it, I think is important. Calling your friends. I have, friends within the space too, that we get together and we chat, or we'll be on a Discord, or, we'll get together, just to kind of, support each other too, or just, having each other's backs and cheering each other on. I think it's important to, like I said, give yourself that distance. Don't read all the comments. And vetting stuff and making sure that you're in a space by your choice too. Because like you said, there's been a lot of opportunities, and sometimes you're like, do they need me more than I need them right now? Probably. What am I going to get from this venture, and leveraging that and being smart about it? Because knowing that this isn't going to be forever. Like, I feel like that was my biggest fear when like the summer went down and all this stuff was happening. And I wrote some stuff about that too. And I think when there's a big opening, there's also going to be a contraction that's going to follow, right? Every great movement. So the civil rights movement, there's always a backlash. We get the hippies to the yuppies, you know what I mean? Then we're going to get this like amazing generation of kids that grew up doing these protests, but then the next one's going to forget because they weren't alive for it. Right. And there's that moment of, when these kids come of age, or when this group hits middle age, it's going to be different, the environment. So it's trying to continue to expand this time as much as possible, to continue to educate people as much as possible, but just knowing that there's going to be a contraction, I think, and trying to take advantage of this space and time right now has been on my mind. So I don't know if that's the mental health portion of it all, but I think just being realistic again. I think like, hey, as much as things seem to change, there's still so much to continue to, that needs to evolve, that's not there yet, that we just also still need to be present to. So not, I guess, gauging expectations for myself, so I'm not disappointed. What is that? Premeditated disappointment? That's expectation, right?
Well, setting your expectation levels. I mean, you can say it's good to have 3 different levels. It's like the high expectations, which are pretty much the Hallmark movie, the medium, which is like, okay, this is much more of the reality. And then of course there's just low, and we don't want to touch that.
Yeah. But being present that any of those are possible at any time. And therapy is important. I think I love therapy. I think it's super helpful. I know it's been really challenging because so many people need it right now because we're all like going through PTSD during this pandemic. And I say during because it's still very much happening. I just
Yes,
went
it
to
is.
COVID funeral last week, and there's still people dying of this awful disease, and people who are been ignorant about it, and it's really hard. And also sometimes it feels hard when you're like, oh my gosh, this world's a dumpster fire and I'm still trying to make content. Like, why? But it's like, well, we got to have someone to, play the violins on the Titanic. Like we're going to keep it going.
Very much so. I think you probably spoke very deeply to the aspect of mental health there, of why it's so important for us. Is it in its own way, it's our own homework that isn't being scripted by somebody else.
Right.
And especially for people of color, what does that mean? I mean, one of my classics was the I don't know if you've ever watched Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the storyline they had, which was Beyond the Stars, where Cisco's character was the science fiction author. And the question was, who would be imagining this future of DS9? And yeah, it would be a Black person. What would a Black person or a person of color be wanting to visualize for the future, or to give them that sense of hope, that sense to escape, when no Hallmark movies are being made for them or for
100%, 100%. Yeah.
A few years ago, I was at a gaming convention, and this guy walked up to me. It turns out he was another therapist as well, and white guy, older guy, and he asked me the question, is like, why don't I see more Black people here at this convention? And I sort of was surprised by it, but I said, okay, well, I can give you at least 3 reasons that come to mind for this. Number one, economics. To have the control to take time off to be here, and gaming in its own way can be rather expensive too. So where is the nature of the funds necessary to be able to come for a weekend and do this? That's one. 2 was the aspect of racism at the tables, and the aspect of all we need is one bad experience and we're never coming back.
Yeah, and that happens too much. That's happened a lot. The microaggressions, just different issues. And even like I always joke with, like, when I first started playing D&D with my friend David, I was like, what's with this race? I was like, y'all need to change this. This is why, like, when people are complaining about that, like having even the titles of things, I was like, you guys can update this stuff. Like, this doesn't feel safe all right away as you're trying to build a character, and you're coming on to, like, the different, like, class, race. I was like, wait, I know they have different connotations in D&D, but like that still already sounds bad. There's a lot of things that it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I mean, but the freedom and fun in it, that's what I want everyone to get, and that's the part that I'm just like, we get past all that stuff. It's just like a real world though, where we get past a lot of stuff to be a part of things that didn't necessarily welcome us initially, right? Like I just like cried my way through King Richard a couple weeks ago. That new movie about the Williams sister's father, so it's Venus and Serena and Richard, and wow, I highly recommend. I don't know, just Black people watch this movie. Everybody should watch it. But I was just like remembering the weight of that moment when you're the first going into something like this, and like you're the one like making way for all these other people, and just to see all these other people who got into the hobby, do you know what I mean, though, because of these kids, and because of their father's foresight and wanting to make sure that they were the best, and also like fortifying them to go out in those courts in these predominantly white spaces, and knowing that their head game was going to be messed with, and continuing to fortify them so that they could be strong. And that's like that mental thing again of just like, that's partly what it is being Black in America, just in general. I was just like, that's what it is you have to fortify yourself constantly, knowing that if I'm going to go into this space, this gaming convention, I have to think about someone might be derogatory towards me. Someone might say something that sets me off in my game, but I either get to rise above it and say something. I was listening to an interview with John M. Chu, I think the other night, like on NPR, and talking about him doing Crazy Rich Asians, then going to do In the Heights, and just like, him as a child being fortified, going out with like to a Chinese, at a restaurant with his parents, and somebody saying something derogatory, but his father being so kind. And he was like, I didn't know why he was so nice. He's like, you have to fill their bellies with kindness, because the next time they meet someone like me, I want them to have that in them instead of, something else going forward. and it's so constantly feeling like you have to be the better person and rise above. That gets old too. It's hard.
Yeah. And we're definitely having that struggle with some of the things that are going on today.
Yeah.
And then the third reason I gave him, which I think sort of also feeds into that, is our own cultural stigma about being interested in gaming, geek culture, nerddom, and so forth. It's often seen as that aspect of, oh, you're the Oreo, or you're not black enough. It's like, so what?
Very uncool. Very uncool. Yeah.
So I see those as being like these three major obstacles to why there weren't more Black people at the convention I was at. I mean, I did see some others, but I just like, there were very few of us.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, it's just, there's a certain spaces that feel welcoming, and then there's people who have made efforts to do that, and then there are those that haven't, and it's not a space that has historically made that a welcoming beacon. It's been very gatekeepery, and that's definitely part and parcel of it. Like, it's like been like a secret club where, like, you know, it's like, oh, we know these things and you guys will never understand it. Feeling like it's like, you know, underestimating Black people of like, you know, brain power to get, you know, understand these, you know, complex rules. It's like, no, anyone can read a book and like figure out this stuff, and like, it's fine. Children play this game. Like, it can't be that crazy, right? Like, it's, you know.
Yeah, because I remember this one person was saying that, no, to play D&D, you've got to know everything in the manual. And I said, no, you don't. You just have to know where to find everything in the manual. That's the power of the index, honey.
Yes. It literally is the power of the index, because it's like, I'm always like, I don't know, flip. Like, you know, you learn your character, learn the person, you know, your character probably really well, and your characters that you play, but then it's all of a sudden you're like, I've never played this class, I've never played this type of character before. And then you get to learn something new. That's kind of the joy of like jumping around and expanding. It's so fun.
Which I think is in its own self one of the beauties of what this genre provides for our mental health. When we've got so many things they're saying, no, you can't. Here you say, I can. Yes, and
the types of people and characters you get to play, you can break boundaries or you know, be anything you kind of want to be. It is a beautiful thing to get to try that out. And so many of my friends, we've talked about this too, just in life, how it's like practice for life, how D&D and how role-play gaming can be such a great way to try on new things. I have so many friends that have, you know, like, speaking of like LGBTQ issues too, like they're like, my characters were gay before I was gay, like, or came out. Do you know what I mean? Or like, you know, characters were trans before they came out. And it's like, there's so many different things that you can try at the table, so to speak, and give your, like, and role play it and see how it fits in your life. And, oh, that actually feels really good. Like, maybe that's, you know, an aspect of my life that I can incorporate. So, and then also, if you're just trying to work some stuff out, and not that I call it therapy, because it shouldn't be therapy, but it plays that role sometimes. I also run karaoke too, so people call me Karaoke. And I always say that I'm like the therapist, because I joke with my brother. I'm like, we both get the people trying to work through some things coming to talk to us. And like, some people are working it out in song, and that's how they come to me. And then you got them coming and just talking to you. But I'm like, it's a similar thing with role-play gaming too, where people are like, you come to the table as you are. Sometimes you had a week. Sometimes you're dealing with something at work, or, you know, somebody's giving you crap wherever else it is in the world, and you get to vanquish a foe, you know, or a monster, and do that in a safe space. You know what I mean? Though, where it's like, you know, you have some ramifications, and you can enjoy a win. You know, you get to get that W, maybe where you're not in the rest of your life at that moment, but you get to have that moment at the table, and it does fill you up, and you get to get those endorphins, you know, from that moment. And I think that can be super beneficial to your mental health too.
Beautiful. And I think that's a perfect place for us to take a break here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. So this is Perry Clark with Teri Gamble, and stay tuned. We'll be right back and continue this lovely discussion we're having.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it, so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Your favorite Voice America Talk Radio Network shows and hosts are in your car, outdoors, and wherever you need them to be. Listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
Do you have knots? Not the physical tightness in your neck and back, and not the ones on a rope, but metaphors for the helpful and unhelpful tugs in life that can help us ascend to a new level or stop us from falling too far back down. Join host Perry Clark for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, a program about mental health and its practice from an Indigenous person of color. We'll help you find the knots that help you and avoid the ones that don't. Listen for new episodes every other week on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Welcome back, folks. This is Perry Clark here, licensed marriage and family therapist, and this is Untangling Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm here with the brilliant, the talented, and the fun Teri Gamble.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Aw.
It's been a pleasure. I've been enjoying this talk, and even the fact that we've gotten to geek out on our games and such.
Yeah.
So the game that made the connection between the fact that you were your Brandon's sister was because I had recently seen he had posted about you being on Nailed It.
Oh, aw.
And so that was going on. And then I happened to be sitting down because there was a Kickstarter going on for Queers It from Sons of Oak Studio on Hyper RPG. So I'd been sitting there watching that. And then as you're doing your closing, you're talking about being on Nailed It. And then that's when the firework connections were going off in my head. It's like, that's Brandon's sister.
Yeah. Aw. That's one of my favorite titles in my life. Brandon's sister. I always loved it. He's one of my favorite people. And the fact that, that's great. We get to connect because of that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So then in that aspect is like, let's talk about Queers It, and let's also talk about the Nailed It experience, because I did enjoy watching you laugh so much.
Oh gosh,
on that.
the edit on that, I was dying. I was like, okay, because like, we filmed that a year ago. It was filmed in September of 2020. It was one of the first things that went into production in the midst of the pandemic, like that went back into filming. So it was like very COVID-y, like filming, like mask on right before, you're doing your scene. So I know my lipstick was crazy. I was like, I kept being like, is it okay? Because I didn't get a chance to look at it right before I walked out. I literally would take my mask off and be on camera. It was a very, very weird, wonderful time. And I had a really great time filming it. And I had all these conversations with Jacques and with, producer Wes and, Nicole. None of it's in the episode. Like all my conversation, it's just me like reduced to a giggling like Muppet I joke about. I'm like, well, I was like, at least I had a good time. And it looks like I had a good time. And it's one of the top rated episodes of the season because I was just crazy laughing. There's like literally no backstory. There's my best friends on episode 4. They get like this whole story about what he does and like talks about his life. We got none of that in my episode. It's just me laughing for like 22 minutes. So it's all good. I had a really, like I said, I had a really good time. It was super fun. And I love this show. I've been a big fan of it since forever. I love making things and I love, making a hot mess in the kitchen. So I got to do all of that. So that was a joy. And then the Queers RPG, that was super fun to get invited to be a part of because that's a manga that they've turned into an RPG now. And the manga is really, really beautiful, very inclusive, and love pours out of this story. Like it's just like about love for community, love for your friends, love for your found family, love for yourself. Like all of this is like encompassed in this beautiful manga. And then to have it turn into an RPG, it was just an honor to get invited and be a part of that table. Like with Ria was there, Brizzy, Voices, Riley Silverman, good friend of mine. Also, we've been on Ripley Improv together. So we do improv shows together online this whole last year. So to get to play in the same room that night was super fun. And Malika running the game at Hyper RPG, just amazing creatives that I've gotten to work with over the years that we got to hang out together for a super fun, colorful night of rainbows and sunshine and rainbow magic.
Exactly. And that standpoint too, because it's like there's the aspect of what does it also mean, not just being people of color playing games and so forth, what does it also mean to be LGBT people of color playing these games, and how games like where that is one of the ones where we can have a space where we are the heroes. Or another one that came out earlier in the year was Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
Yes, I've had quite a few friends been playing some of those too, and we love love. No one's invited me to play yet, so hopefully they will. But no, I'm sure I could ask. I'm sure I could make some calls. But that would be super fun to play as well. I love the idea of it. Even me and my podcast co-host did a vampire lesbian like month of movies as a theme, because the subgenres you can get into between like horror and like role play gaming, there's so many fun little like offshoots that you can get into, and some sweet games.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I my wallet opened up quite easily for both of those quite an aspect. Kickstarter is a dangerous place for my wallet.
Oh, but it's just so nice to know that you can directly support, content creators that are diverse, like that's the way to find them. Is people are like, there isn't this and this. I'm like, y'all need to look. There's a lot of independent people and games that are being made that are exactly what you want and exactly what people say there isn't. Like they just need support and funding and to find their space out there. So
exactly. And that's another reason why my wallet opened so easily for stuff on Kickstarter for that, because none of that was around when I was growing up. And it's like, now I can get it and hoping to have more of it out there. At this point now, it's like, I also need to make a point, hopefully in this next year or two, go to Blerddom.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of opportunity now. And I'm very happy for the kids. I'm excited. I'm just glad that it feels better. I don't know if it is, but it feels better, for just more opportunity right now. So I'm just grateful.
Very much so. Very much so. So I got to ask, as you were saying, your experience on Nailed It, did you get to keep the hat?
Oh yeah, I have it here. It is a hot mess.
I know. I'm always watching that as I'm just watching all the glitter.
It's in a trash bag in my closet. It is literally like, as soon as you put it on, you're like, oh, this is a mark. It's like, you get a target on your back all of a sudden. It's literally like just glitter rolling down my back the whole rest of the day. And I strategically, like, I wasn't sure, like I had, I did my pre-game vision boarding in my mind, I call it, where you're like, okay, I'm going to go in there. I want to like, this is what I want to do. Like, I was like, I see my way to getting that hat. I was like, I'm going to get the hat. I was like, I'm going to win. Like, I was just like very focused. I was like, I'm going to do all this stuff. And like, so I did. And that's why I wore my head wrap too. Cause I was like, if I get glitter all up in this hair.
Yeah. That
was very strategic as well. I thought about it ahead of time. I was like, I'm not going to want to deal with that. And I'm going to be smart about this. So I was, and I'm so glad I did. Cause it was like my hotel room. Cause we were like in a quarantine hotel. My hotel room, like was like a trail of like just glitter everywhere.
I know. Every time I see someone pick those up, every time I see someone pick those up, I'm just watching the glitter fall off of that. It's like,
I just imagine it was in everything I made that day. I was just like, oh God, it's going to be in this cake. Like, it's just going to be covered in glitter. Like, this is so bad. It is the messiest hat that they ever, I'm sure some PA was back there just like, spray gluing or whatever. I don't know how they make it, but it was just, it's messy.
Oh man.
But yeah, no, I have it. I do have it.
Yeah, equally in that aspect, as you said, is producer Wes. It's like, okay, part of me, and I'm sure that's don't want to break the illusion, you don't have to speak to that, is like, I'm surprised that, quite frankly, he's not suing for sexual harassment.
I was pretty bad. I was pretty bad with him too, and they did not have any of that. I was like, oh my God, he's such a dear heart, and he works really hard. He's really working the whole time. Like, he's calling the show. Like, he's like he's like the main producer on the floor, and he's lovely, super nice. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I get why people would bother him, because he's just so sweet and he's just so handsome, but he's married and he's like I did ask.
I'll be able to share that with my partner when we watch it too. And it's like, he's got beautiful hair, just beautiful.
He does. And he's like much bigger than I thought. Like, he's really tall and like kind of like a mountain. I was like, ooh, okay.
Well, that makes the the episode where he walks out in the Thor costume, even more funnier.
Oh, he's a Thor. He's a full-on Thor. Like he's like that
Mhm.
kind of handsome IRL, and like also just like I said, just very kind and very, very sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very nice. So what are some of the other things that are on the horizon for you that you can talk about? Let's just stick with the stuff that
Oh
you know you
gosh.
can talk about, as
Oh
opposed to
gosh.
any NDAs I'm gonna have to wipe.
Sure. Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. It is, what's happening right now? We're almost to our 250th episode at Horror Movie Survival Guide. So
Mhm.
should be having some fun stuff coming out for that. We got some great interviews lined up. That I'm super pumped. I can't tell you who, but I can tell you that we have some interviews coming up. We always have great people. Our 200th was with Keenan Thompson, so 250 is going to be great too. I also coming up on the Hulu show Dollface with Kat Dennings. My episode should be finally dropping for that. I'm super excited to be a part of that. I'm working right now. Should be coming out done too soon with the 3 Black Halflings, some of my favorite people in roleplay gaming. I got to meet them in the end of 2020 during the holiday time, and have never looked back. I got introduced to them. Actually, Abria was like, you need to know these people. They're amazing. I was like, great. Smartest, funniest, most wonderful roleplay gaming podcast as well. Check out the 3 Black Halflings if you haven't out there. People who listen to Perry's show. I think if you love Perry, you'll love them. Like I think that's what it comes down
I've started
to.
listening to them as well. So
yeah,
I make a rule that when I find something like that, it's like, okay, I got to start working my way through the archive to get myself current, as opposed to just starting current and not know what's going on. So
or jump around. Give yourself permission to jump around. It's okay. Because there's some episodes you're probably going to want to jump to, and then there's some campaign stuff that you're going to love even more too, and they just keep doing more amazing things and keep getting better. Plus you're going to jump to my episode soon, because
of course
was a guest on their show, and then also I'm doing a campaign with them, so I'm really excited about that. I feel like what else I don't know what else to talk about. What else is coming up? I lose track sometimes of the timeline.
Well, like you said, you've been busy. And as we were just briefly talking during the break, being a therapist with everything that happened with the pandemic, not like I wasn't working. It wasn't like I was just sitting around. It's like there was a lot of people dealing with their mental health.
Everybody calling, I'm sure. I know the backlog and wait list, even wait times, it's depending on where you're trying to get support, has been a challenge.
And even for you, is busy. But I think that's also a nice segue into one of our standards on this show, which is myths and realities around mental health. Ooh. So what would you say is one of the myths that we have or we deal with around mental health? And let's talk about the realities around it.
Oh my gosh, this is what I was thinking about. And this is one that gets me, that I've been really like present to with some of my friends, is there's the myth that you have to be fixed or okay to have a relationship. And I think that that's like one of the worst damaging things, one of those myths that's been out there. Like you have to be in a certain way. Like if you don't love yourself, I'm like, a lot of us are in some sort of evolution on loving ourselves. Like it doesn't always mean that's total. There's going to be days where you love yourself, and there's days where you don't love yourself quite as much. Doesn't mean that you're not like worthy of less love from someone at that time. And I think that's one of the myths that really, I think, needs to be dispelled and just like done away with. Because I think everyone deserves love, no matter where you are on the spectrum of loving yourself.
Oh, very true. I know when I talk with a number of clients when we're talking about relationships, one of the things I point out is that in the society and world we live in, we're very good about teaching what you want physically or monetarily.
Yes.
Not necessarily what people want emotionally. And any relationship is going to be about the emotional connection, because that's actually what's got to sustain it. When, the roof is leaking, little Billy's getting bullied at school, you're having to sit in traffic because you're trying to make sure the money's coming home to take care of the family and so forth. Somebody
when you work in opposite
died.
schedules all of a sudden, and like, yes.
And that's also one of the things that sort of became critical too with everything that's happened with the pandemic. A lot of people and a lot of relationships suddenly realized, oh, they're not as connected as they thought. And I've said to a number of clients, there's more reasons people get married than just love.
There's a lot more reasons. And that's something that I think, again, going back to the thought about expectation, there's that expectation or the idea of the relationship that's in your mind versus the actual relationship, right? And so I think interacting with what we think of as like love, and you're like, oh, I thought I love this person. It's like, no, you love the idea of this relationship with this person, but not that person. And so I think, yeah, that's the next step. That's the next level, right? Is being present to that. I love that about the emotional portion, though. That's so true, because that's really what it comes down to. It's like you could have, you know, when they lose the money, what do you do? If that's what you're looking at, when they lose the body, because that happens a lot too.
That's going to happen just by the nature of
gravity wins. I always tell the kids, gravity, she's gonna win. She's coming for you all.
And gravity is backed up by time. They've got their nice little formation to be able to do that.
Punch. Yeah, gravity and time will get you every time. Yeah.
That means they've got the long-lasting spell, or the spell that hits you every round.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So and equally, because we talk about Hallmark, there's also both Hallmark and Disney are two of the biggest culprits about that misteach us about relationships.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because there is that sort of not just sanitized that happily ever after, and again, happily ever after means that absolutely nothing changes in the relationship.
Yep.
And the reality is, it doesn't.
Yeah, we change. I think that's the thing, like that myth of like, oh, this is this person. It's like, no, you're going to evolve together or not. Like sometimes that's part of the nature of relationship too. It's like sometimes you realize that you literally have different interests in 10 years, or you figure out a way to work with it. Like I always joke with my parents, like my dad plays ukulele like all day. Like he'll sit outside and play. And like my mom is not really a big fan, but they have a big enough house where she'll go on the other side and do what she's got to do so he can enjoy himself. They've made space for each other, for each other's hobbies that they don't necessarily like jive with or excited about, stuff that maybe doesn't drive you, but if you are able to make space for each other's, you know, desires and wants and like fun that they love, then that's going to be more fruitful than if you're like pushing that away, or if it's too much, or if those differences, you know, can't mesh well anymore, don't converge anywhere. It's more challenging.
And that's where also it's about the other relationships that can sustain that, because no one person can sustain every part of a person, and that feeds into what's also saying about the idea that you have to be in this place of loving yourself. Yes, you do want to love yourself, and I don't disagree with that concept. Again, it's about how it's executed. And it's understanding about how you're loving yourself, why you're loving yourself, and who's also supporting you loving yourself.
Who's on your team? Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, putting that weight on one person is really, it's a lot. I know I've thought about that too. Just like, oh, we asked this person, like, you know, back in the day, it was like arranged marriage, or it was this type of marriage, or it was like, we just need to make sure the farm keeps going. So we got to make sure we have some kids. Like, it's just like, there was different agreements. And now that we have a little more leisure in our lives, so to speak, as humans at this point, we have more time, you know, to be with these people. And like, we can't put all that onus of like, they've got to like all my hobbies. They've got to do all the same things. They've got to like think that this is great. And it's like, no, they might not think all of that's great. They got to think you're great and love you. And hopefully, you know, you find somebody who agrees with all of that. But you have best friends for some of that stuff. I'm like, I have my friends I go to see musicals with, you know, that's like, we're the musical crew, you know, you got your friends that want to go karaoke. There are friends who never want to be at the karaoke bar with me, you know, like that don't want to hear bad singing all night. Like, I love it. So you got to find your people. Yeah.
Sorry, I was having momentary flashbacks to my summer job when I was a teenager at the local amusement park. Here, the section I was working in was the section with the karaoke stand.
Oh, you loved it. Look at your face. You loved it.
So there was those moments where it's like amusing to watch them, and other times it's like, please just stop singing.
I love it. I'm like strangely, I'm that person. I always start my show. I always tell the people the only thing better than good karaoke is bad karaoke. You know, you're there to entertain the people for 3 to 5 minutes. Doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. People just want to enjoy something. And even to hate watch people, like people love that even more sometimes than like watching them in a loving way. I still with love from me, because I think it's all commendable, because it's very vulnerable for people to share their voice. And I
Mhm.
also am a big proponent of just like, a lot of guys will get up and sing badly and don't care, but a lot of women will sit in the bar and hold themselves back because they think it needs to be perfect. And there's a
Mhm.
different expectation on women's voices. So
Mhm.
my kind of like thing is like, I always try to get as many women in the bar to sing as possible or wherever I'm at. So I've run, karaoke at, like for the Vanity Fair party at the ESPYs to like the diviest
Mhm.
dive bars. Like I'm like it's very much my thing and I love it. Highbrow, lowbrow, good singers, bad singers, just because you never know where someone's at and I want them to be able to express. So that's a part of a expressing your emotion, loving yourself, finding your voice, I think is all kind of connected to that too.
And that's all part of loving yourself,
Mhm.
even before you start loving somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
And all
that's
your faults, you're beautiful, your warbles, whatever.
because that's also what makes the difference between a level 1 character and a level 20 character. Because just because they
Ooh.
got that power doesn't mean they also don't have that cursed weapon.
Right. And they also
Mm-hmm.
still have the same monsters coming to get them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're still contending with something. Everyone's got some sort of fight that they're contending with uh at all levels. So
Precisely.
yeah.
Precisely. So with that, I think it's time we go ahead and close this episode. I am tremendously grateful for you being here, and Brandon, we're going to have a little chat soon.
Yeah, B, wait. Like, why didn't you wake up? I tried calling, I tried texting. What's going on?
So where are other places people can find you if they want to be in touch with you, just to enjoy your work or get some ideas? Because I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there looking for some mentoring.
Oh my gosh. You're so funny. You can find me on the internet at the Teri Gamble on the social medias. That's Teri with 1 R. You can find me terigamble.com, or you can go to my link tree / the Teri Gamble. It's the best way to find me. I'm all over the internet there. You also find me at Horror Movie Survival Guide or at Our Black History. There's links to all of that from my site as well. So
All righty. So we'll put
yeah.
that over in the log notes, and equally, I just should, for everyone's transparency, we're recording this in December, and this should be coming out in February. I think it's going to be the first episode for February.
Okay.
All righty. So thank you again. It has been a pleasure. And for everyone listening, keep listening here at Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered on Voice America Network. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.